Okay, thank you. Hello. Yeah, I knew this is going to be an empty room, but it's very empty, and it's the totally contradictor of the offline space. If I put this on the online space, sorry. If I put this gender and tech in the online space, I guess I'm gonna have a mob telling me to shut up, right? So my name is Jovana, and I come from Macedonia. I'm working in an organization about reproductive and sexual health and rights. But apart from that, I'm collaborating with the Tactical Tech, and I was part of this, what happened, what was the Gender and Tech Institute, and what are the goals and aims. So why the gender perspective? When I told my friends that I'm going to talk about this, they told, oh my God, is technology discriminating you again, you feminist? You're so boring and things like that. But even if it sounds funny, let's try to think about it a little bit and try to see if there is a need of gender perspective. I mean, gender-based violence is still a great issue globally, and it's present in all the places of the world. Maybe in different levels, maybe the women have different positions, but still, if somewhere in the world women can be found guilty for being pregnant before getting married and get stoned about it, men can be just found not guilty just because they will swear that they are not the father. So this is a great issue. But then there is this contra side of places where women maybe can be economically independent, maybe they are paid equally, maybe they can run for positions in politics, right? But does this mean that in those places too we don't have to talk about gender and gender perspective? Because even if it's a localized issue and we need different perspectives, it's still a global issue. It's still present everywhere. Why? Because the main insults globally remain to be, don't be such a pussy, don't be such a girl. I mean, we can see this in every country. We can feel it and we can know that this comes from something else. It doesn't come if it's good to be a woman, it comes on how we're trained to think. It comes from when we were born in some sex, right? Male, female, maybe intersex. But still, gender norms are something that is already predefined for us from our birth. So gender roles, are behaviors that we should adopt just because we have some reproductive organs. And gender roles are something that is already predetermined for our existence and our behavior. So I don't think that only women are victims of gender norms. I think men and women are equally victims of these gender norms. But still, violence and harassment, victims of violence and harassment are more in number women. So what's the problem? If we don't conform to those norms, we're out of the normal, so we're a source of harassment, we can be threatened, and we can be even subjected to violence. Because the isolation of being normal means that you're somebody different and you're not conforming, so you should be put in place. Like women should be put in place because they don't conform, right? If they're not good women, and if they're not softened, if they're not the gender that is beautiful, and if they're not conforming to men, then they should be harassed. So this is also the source of misogyny, but also the source of homophobia. Why is it so strange and so bad and so provocative for two gays to be together, two gay men to be together, and not that much for women? Even this has another source, but let's not go so deep. Two women that are together should be put in place because they have never seen the male presence, so they're objectified as something for men to have pleasure, and if men appear there, then those women will be put in place. But if we have two men that are together. Why is this so provocative? Why is this the source of violence? Because one of that men is the traitor of the masculinity. Because one of those men, those two men, should be in a passive role. Because the passive role is not the role of masculinity, of dominance, of power. So the threatening here is that men are seen as feminine, in a feminine sense, in a feminine role, so this is the provocation. So why is this also important? I mean, as I said before, from when we were born, we are subjected to also different toys, different colors, and I love this example because if we try to use this more, maybe we will make some change, because women have, I mean, girls have different toys than boys. And girls play more statically. They're in one place, they play for careness, to care about their dolls and to play with them, and this is the main concept. Apart from that, boys are more dynamic. They should move in space, they should be with the wheel, and they should explore the different, they should make Lego, or they should try to do some mechanical stuff, and they should see how their father or mother are doing the electricity or whatever. So why is this important about technology? Because from young, we're subjected to some kind of behavior that we should adopt, and by just being girls or boys. I mean, girls are normally, you don't have to worry about that. That is here, I'm gonna repair it. So don't worry, it's technology. Don't go and play with your dolls. But boys are still come see. You should see how I designed this. Maybe one day you'll be an engineer. Maybe one day you will be and work there for NASA or whatever, right? So I wanted to say this because it's very, very connected to each other. So when somebody is asking me, is technology discriminating you, you stupid feminists? I don't think that technology is discriminating me. But let's see this from three perspectives. First, about online harassment and who is subjected more on online harassment. The physical access to technology and the psychological access to technology. I mean, first, if women are taking stand and stating opinion on the issue of gender, this is a source of harassment. I mean, there are millions of examples, and we're going to talk about that afterwards. So also men taking stand by challenging masculinity also are a source for harassment online, also offline. We still live in this world where man is symbol for strength and women is symbol for softness. So this has a big influence on what technology means for men and women. And technology just opened another source where gender violence has reflected itself on the online space. So regarding online harassment, if we think about the women that were talking about feminism, and then a great mob of angry people were commenting and trolling and threatening and insulting, normally the argument is, well, it's freedom of speech. Everybody can say everything there, right? So why are you trying to shut us down? When she's talking, we're talking, and that's it. But let's imagine that in the offline space. If I stand here and talk about something connected to gender, and then 2,000 of angry men and women come around and start yelling, well, it's not going to be an issue of freedom of speech for those men and women. It's going to be an issue of freedom of speech for myself, because I'm going to feel the pressure, I'm going to feel everything, I'm going to be afraid, so I'm going to shut up, normally. So it's the same in online space. It's the same pressure, it's the same psychological pressure, it's the same threatening, it's the same, there are the same risks. Those are some of the examples. I'm not sure if you know this example. It's one woman who launched a Kickstarter program to raise money for research that was called Troops versus Women in Video Games. So she tried to collect money. I'm not sure if you know what Kickstarter is. It's a platform where we can pose our ideas so we can collect money and then implement our ideas. So because her idea was women in video games, which is something that is considered as male thing, she got very a subject of harassment, of hate speech, insults, threats. Some of her social media profiles were hacked, some of her personal data was exposed, and she had to leave her home because she was a victim. These two pictures are actually one video game that somebody has made. So the game was Come On Beat Up Anita Sarkenstein. And you can click on it and then she will be beaten up. So as much as creative as it sounds, or maybe not, it's awful. Because if we are playing with somebody's life like this, it's a big source of pressure and fear. So these are some of the remarks. I'm going to come to your house and violently rape you in front of your family. I want to fucking stab your stupid fucking ugly shaped face, you feminist cunt. Kill yourself, no one will care, bitch. So this is how she reacted. She said that she has been forced to cancel her talk after receiving death threats because police wouldn't take steps to prevent concealed firearms at the event. So these threats are not considered as serious as they should, because this pressure is not very, very easy to handle. And nor the legislative, I mean, there is existing legislative in many countries, but does people really understand that legislative as serious as something else? These are other examples for Brianna Wu and Zoe Quinn, which are also women activists or women who did something that was connected to gender and femininity in places that they shouldn't have been. So they were also harassed on the online space, and both had to leave their homes because of the threats that they received. If we take a stand a little bit back, and if we talk now a little bit about the physical access to technology, I will say it again, it's different, and even if it's a global issue, it's different in many places. So we cannot approach it globally. We have to talk with context and to think about more locally. But there are still places, and they're not that distant from us, where just having a device can be a reason for death. Arifa Bibi, who was mother of two children, was stoned to death, and her only crime was having a mobile phone. This is one testimony of a participant that was also on the Gender and Tech Institute that I will talk a little bit later. And her testimony was, I live in a country in which a man may kill his wife because she has a Facebook account. So if we take in consideration also this side, that physically accessing the devices can be also a risk for women, we should understand that there is a difference depending on what community we are or not. So the access is also more difficult in many places, but also the psychological, there are also other testimonies of the GTA participants. Those are the general theme of surveillance was a background in my life. I come from a conservative family, and what I said, what I wrote, talked on the phone, and things like that were under surveillance. How can we communicate safely without fearing for our lives? And the situation is becoming more alarming than before, and the climate of fear is increasing day by day. Women are bullied worse than anyone else just because they're women, and should follow the norms on how to be a good woman. These are also some other testimonies. My gender did not allow me access to technology or internet. People do not think about what kind of technology is used by men and what kind by women. You don't see it clearly, but the barrier is there. Maybe I did not think I was supposed to have a computer, but my brothers had a computer right away, so I just used theirs. I remember once I went to a job interview about a topic I knew well, although I was young. I had been doing that for already 4 years, and the guy told me I was too nice to be there, that I should not do that this is a man's job. So this is happening, and the general context and generally engineering and technology are seen as male professions. This can also cause, as we were talking before, we are trained in some way, we have gender roles, we behave in some way, etc. But this also influences the self-confidence of women of using technologies, and influences also the risks, but also the feeling of a woman that thinks that they cannot do something with technologies just because they're women. So this is also a problem because mostly technology is designed by men. This wouldn't have been a problem if everybody is aware of our privileges, of gender norms, of gender roles, and how to make technology accessible to everybody, to every community. But if not, if we have just one perspective, then we have a lack of perspectives of not just women, but all the marginalized communities that have different needs. One of the examples that is here is Facebook real name policy. If we think about it, Facebook did this just because they had one perspective. Yeah, users have to have real names, so they are not going to hide behind their pseudonyms and etc. But if we think about in terms of a transgender person living in Macedonia, for example, this is a very big risk because or they're not going to access technology, or they're going to access it and everybody is going to know their identity and they're put in risk on violence or maybe even death. So my point is that when we design technology, softwares, we're designing it in a certain way, but the lack of perspective, women perspective, and marginalized communities perspective gives us technology and space where not everybody can be safe. However, also it is seen if we talk generally that both women and men are equally using technology, so there is a gap there. Because the risks are different and the using of technology is the same. So the use of technology is necessity. We all know that. And if we think that somewhere it's a bigger risk because you can get stoned, but there somewhere it's a risk just because you don't feel secure in using it. And somewhere it's a risk because you feel secure using it, but you think, oh, everybody's watching me, I don't know, I don't have anything to hide. This is unawarely also a great risk because what we use and we don't understand puts our sensitive information in danger, which can also put us in danger physically. So women, from one hand, the use of internet is crucial for coordination of actions, enabling a wider reach out, for connecting, making bigger communities online, reaching to somebody who we cannot reach offline. But then on the other hand, women and activists are increasingly exposed to surveillance, harassment, and actions such as leaking intimate or personal details, doxing, identity theft, revenge porn, blackmailing, hijacking of devices, social media accounts, and calls for violence, rape, or death. So all these factors have led to a situation in which the internet is not a safe place, and in which women's work and voices have been shut down, censored, but also disappearing, but then also attacked. So this is why we need to understand technology first and use it very cautiously, because it's a very great thing that we're using on everyday basis. So we need to as we think about physical security, we need to think about digital security too. Oh, sorry. So this was the reason why Tactical Tech and APC have made a project called Securing Online and Offline Freedoms for Women, Expression, Privacy, and Digital Inclusion. And this project had one institute that was organized in 2014. And this institute was called Gender and Tech Institute. So this institute gathered around many women from around the world. And the things that were done there and were trainings for skills, but also for tools, using tools for privacy advocates and digital security trainers. Why we were talking before a lot, the use of tech can also be a risk to privacy, but also this makes our security less. And then the bigger risks are also for sensitive issues, but also it's not just for communities. Vocal women, journalists, and influential women who are talking and taking stand are also under attack, as we showed before. So one of the things that this institute has taken in considerations was the lack of privacy is also a lack of space in local context. That means that many of the participants that were in the GTI did not feel that they have trustworthy people around them in their local context with whom they can talk and they can learn and they can practice digital security tools so they can increase their security. But also it's the same, this leads also to isolation. And the isolation can be also a feeling that discourages us for taking any action for securing ourselves. The aim of this institute was to improve the skills of the participants, but also to give them skills and tools that they can share with their communities, because the only projects that can stand afterwards are the ones that are embedded in the communities and they can develop skills and learn together, because it's the same, the story about the fish. Give a person a fish and they will eat one day, but teach him how to fish and they will eat for years. So it's the same story. It's always, we can teach somebody something, but if we don't give them the skills to share that thing, then especially in the context of digital security, where you cannot use those tools alone. You need to use those tools with the community, and if the community is not using them, they're putting you also in a danger. So this is very important about that. So mostly it was concentrating on increasing the number of privacy advocates, but also digital security trainers in this sense. And some of the topics why Gender Tech Institute that were covered were gender and technology, privacy and surveillance, holistic security, self-care, risk analysis, tackling online violence, and developing feminist principles of the internet. It's very important, I would say why it's very important, the holistic approach, but what happened there was actually gathering around for 48 women from all around the world with diverse profiles that felt that they need somebody to talk about, but also there were women that were more experienced and already having workshops and digital security trainings doing in their communities. So this amount of women that are working in this field and women that want to learn about this and increase their security has made a very, very nice atmosphere for the participants to learn. There were women from 30 countries, but the interesting thing is that 350 applications were sent, which actually shows us the necessity of these kinds of programs and how many people, even if they have locally different contexts, have found themselves in this issue and that they need to improve their skills for security. So the approach that the project had in the institute was multi-faced. That's what I've told before about not just learning the skills, but also learn how to practice them and share them in our communities. And do not harm approach, which actually is concentrating also on the safety and well-being of the target groups, and this was also in the center of the activities. Also, it's very important to have intersectionality, because we cannot concentrate only on one phenomena, because there are diversity of cultures, social status, gender identification, sexual orientations, race, ethnicities, and there are many forms of homophobia, racism, misogynia, that actually they are interconnected, and we cannot concentrate just on one, because mostly, very often, it's produced also double discrimination, and we need to have this in mind so we can talk about these issues and actually make those people also listen and try to use those tools, because if we talk just in one context, nobody will just listen and will say, in my country, in my place, this is not possible, and they'll just quit the idea. The holistic security approach, it was also talked before yesterday. It's also acknowledging that stress and trauma, but also the fatigue, can very much influence our rationale, how we make decisions, and this can influence also our work, and making our decision based on our fatigue could be really the wrong decision. So the holistic approach tries to connect not just the physical security, not just the digital security, but also the well-being, and talk in an integrated way, so that we need to feel calm and safe in a space so we can talk about tools that we're going to use. Also, in the institute, it was used the ADITS approach, which is actually activity, discussion, input, deepening, and synthesis, which is a way to do workshops with adult participants, which is important because, as we know, it's a little bit more difficult to learn when we're a little bit older. But it's integrating all these ways of learning so we can use and have the knowledge that we have gained more practical, but also there were hands-on sessions, which was actually practicing the tools that we are learning. But also very important was that there were sharing sessions. It was not just facilitators teaching participants, but everybody was learning from everybody. And there was a hacker corner that was 24 hours responsible for people to ask questions and talk about everything they want. So the results of this institute were that 48 women from 30 different countries were trained to become privacy advocates, but also digital security trainers. And the participants after the institute have organized 50 activities on their own across 18 countries dealing with gender and technology, privacy and digital security. And this is very, very important because it didn't just stay there on the institute. It was then shared, and then there was an effect afterwards also. So also there were some resources that were made, which are also one of the methods of how to make this sustainable. and that's sharing resources, but also having a place to go if we need them when we want to do some training or part of advocacy. So this is one of them, the Women's Rights Campaigning Info Activism Toolkit. This is the other, as we talked before, we need context, and not everything is applicable everywhere. So this is the guide for LGBT in the Middle East and Northern Africa for digital security. And there was also the Zen and the Art of Making Tech Work for You, which is a manual for including gender into privacy and digital security. So the two things that are important in this guide was how can we craft appropriate online presences that strengthen our ability to communicate and work online safely, and how can we collaboratively create safe online and offline spaces that enable our communities to share, collaborate, and communicate safely. There was also a platform, a wiki platform that was made, so everybody who is doing anything, they can put it there, upload it, and we have like documents for over 60 workshops and training organized on the ground from 22 different countries. So everybody from the participants and interested can go there and see there are activities, tutorials, storytelling, and how-tos, so they can use this in their work in future. After the institute, there was a evaluation on two grounds, which was the survey and the interviews. And the survey showed that in regard of the use of privacy and digital security tools of the participants, it was found that before the GTI, 2/3 of participants had no practical experience at all, and only a very basic use of those tools. But then after the GTI, most of them have incorporated privacy and digital security dimensions into their work, much more than they used to do. And 25 of 32 have used open source operative systems, but also it is good result that the additional 17 participants claimed that after the GTI have started using the open source tools. From the interviews of the participants, it can be seen how this institute had an influence, and some of those testimonies are GTI changed my life turned around. The whole process of facilitating, the methodology used was very nice. I tried to do the same. It was a very holistic experience. I really liked it. What was very useful was the approach, the meta-knowledge, the way to do the trainings. My skills as a trainer are a result of the GTI. I have the confidence that I can be a trainer here locally, so I can do something more about it. So instead of continuing to read you the other testimonies, I can tell you my experience, which is I was participant in the GTI, and this was my introduction to digital security. I was on one training before, I got very interested, but I didn't have with whom to practice it, so I just said, well, never mind, maybe someday. And the GTI came along, I made my application, I got in, and I realized there are lots of people that are working in this subject. I realized I can do this, although I was studying to be a lawyer, and I kind of quit that because I didn't like it. So I have seen that this can make my work more significant. This can make what I want to do in my community in Macedonia, especially now that there was a big scandal of surveillance where the government was intercepting communication of activists and the opposition and everybody else. So there were lots of communications that leaked in the public, and there were lots of demonstrations and everything. Especially in this moment, I can help. I know these tools, I can share these tools, I can make activists in my country feel more safely, and I can actually propagate in some way that this is very important, because nobody is seeing this issue as something, I mean, not nobody, because there are people here, but mostly people are seeing this issue as something, well, there is no sense of thinking about it. But there is sense, because maybe there is no absolute security, but at least we can diminish the chances that we can be attacked or whatever. We can actually increase our chances of being secure if we know 3 or 4 more tools. And no, they're not complicated, because if we're using Facebook and Twitter, we can use these tools too. It's very actually easy. So many activities were organized by the participants. These are some of them. Raising ICT skills of women in urban and rural areas, sustaining training over time, the Digital Trainer Summit, International Feminist Hackathon. So all this was after the GTI, and some of these initiatives took place just because the GTI was organized, and some of them were because people were also doing this before. But the very important thing is that activists connected on that institute and then started doing activities and started doing strategies together for making it better. So through the organization of the GTI and other related training activities, women human rights defenders were helped, and activists to understand how their issues are being affected by the ways in which offline discrimination, control, and abuse play out in the online environment, and to find strategies for handling the barriers posed to their free expression online. There is a big importance in that, because they were building capacities, developing capacities about these tools, but also building a strong network, which is very important, especially in this context, because we cannot use this alone. And there was also, it has produced a bigger support and a greater number of implementing trainings in local communities. Something that is planned for afterwards, because this GTI has shown that it's very effective and very important for women activists. Something that is planned for the future is making another gender and tech institutes, but more locally, and the first that is organized is in South America. And this is also intended to do a bigger network locally, so the subject can be more contextualized and localized, so it could also be more effective. But also in plan there are circular guides for hate speech and online harassment, so this project got 3 more years, so I hope it's going to have lots of more. I want to finish just with one sentence that was written in the impact study of the GTI, which I think is very, very important. Liberating technologies can be defined as those that are designed mindfully, fairly, produced and distributed, are rooted in free and open source software principles, are not designed for planned obsolescence, and are built to be secure by design. In the same spirit, but ultimately determined by what users do, that the technology, systems, and digital services we choose are not designed for or are resistant for use in gender-based violence and surveillance. So, yeah, that's it. I will stop talking now. If you have any questions, please, it's the time.
But actually, which has been the kind of tactics that are the easiest to be repeated and deployed from a group of women? So in the GTI experience, which tactics for online defense has been created?
Well, a lot of tactics there were.
Yeah,
it's like
the
7 days of... But some of the examples are actually how to protect our passwords. What are strong passwords? Because this is one of the things that people think they have strong passwords, but then some of their personal data is leaking. Then we try to understand how the internet works, right? And what are the points of interception of communication, how we can circumvent those points, and how we can avoid being intercepted, our communication being intercepted. But also there was end-to-end encryption, how to make our communication safe and how to be sure in that we're talking to the people and nobody else is seeing that communication. But also very important about how to authenticate and how to be sure that we are talking with the person that we think we're talking. So there are lots of tactics, and we need to talk more about it, but there is a program from half a day but till 5 days of training that can be passed and have a little bit more of knowledge in what we're getting into in the online space. No questions? Okay. Thank you very much for being here.